It was a Wednesday morning when Eleanor closed the final box in what used to be her room. Sunlight streamed through the half-open window, warming the dust motes dancing in the air. She paused, looking around at the fading wallpaper, the rocking chair by the window, the dent on the wall where Michael had once slammed his door after his first heartbreak. Everything held a memory. Every breath in this house still smelled like her late husband's aftershave and Sunday pancakes. She heard footsteps in the hallway. Michael, her son, her only child. "You ready, Mom?" His voice came flat, practical, with a hint of tension he didn't bother to hide. She turned slowly. Michael wasn't looking at her. He stood in the doorway with his hands shoved into his coat pockets, shoulders stiff like he had somewhere better to be. "I'm ready," she said, her voice barely a whisper. In truth, she wasn't, but she said it anyway. The car was already packed. Amber, Michael's wife, was in the passenger seat, fiddling with her phone. She looked up briefly. "Hi, Eleanor," she said, not unkindly, but without warmth. Eleanor climbed into the back seat. The door shut with a soft thunk that sounded more final than it should have. The drive to Willow Pines assisted living took about 40 minutes. The silence stretched longer. Michael tapped the steering wheel. Amber scrolled, occasionally sighing. No one spoke. Eleanor gazed out the window. It was late October, and the trees had turned their fiery colours reds, and golds, and oranges so vibrant they looked unreal. When Michael was a boy, he used to run through those leaves, making up stories about dragons, and castles, and imaginary kings. She remembered bundling him in a red scarf, chasing him with the camera. Her fingers tightened around her purse. Willow Pines appeared ahead, nestled between two maple trees, with white columns and beige brick. It looked like a country inn from the outside, a welcoming facade. Inside, it smelled like lemon disinfectant and old paperbacks. A young receptionist greeted them with a professional smile, clipboard in hand. "Eleanor Thomas, we've been expecting you." Michael handed over a stack of forms. He looked at his watch. "I have a conference call in an hour," he muttered to Amber. "Don't worry, we'll make it quick," she said. They escorted Eleanor to her room. Room 212. A twin bed, a dresser, a small armchair, and a narrow window that looked out onto the parking lot. She placed her bag on the bed. "Well, here we are," Michael said, attempting a smile. We'll come visit soon, Mom." Eleanor opened her mouth to reply, but no words came. Amber gave her a quick hug, more like a pat. "Take care, Eleanor." And just like that, they were gone. The door clicked shut. Eleanor stood in the middle of the room, unsure whether to sit or cry or unpack. She ended up doing none of those things. She stared at the door for a long time, as if willing it to open again. Days passed slowly. Time took on a syrupy quality, thick and sluggish. Meals came at scheduled times. Medication carts rattled down the halls. Televisions murmured in common rooms. Nurses smiled like clocks, all routine and rhythm. Her neighbour across the hall, Doris, was a lively woman in her 70s with silver hair and a rebellious spirit. "They always say they'll visit," Doris said one morning over lukewarm oatmeal. "But life gets busy. We become inconvenient." Eleanor managed a smile. "Maybe, but he's a good boy." Doris gave her a long look. "Even good boys forget their mothers, dear. They just do it politely." Thursdays were family hour. Visitors were encouraged to come between 3 and 5 p.m. Eleanor put on her best sweater the first week. She brushed her hair and applied a little lipstick. She sat in the lounge, heart fluttering each time the door opened. He didn't come. The second Thursday, she waited again. Still nothing. The third time, she stayed in her room. Doris found her later, eyes red. Said nothing. Just handed her a cup of chamomile tea and a piece of chocolate. It became a routine. Eleanor started writing in her notebook again, memories mostly. Pages filled with letters she never sent. She wrote about how John proposed to her at a diner in Vermont, how Michael once saved a baby squirrel, how she made papier-mâché volcanoes with him for his third-grade science fair. She needed to remember that her life had been full once. Until one Thursday in late November. Michael came. She saw him through the glass door and nearly dropped her tea. He looked tired. He walked in with a grocery bag, and that half-smile she hadn't seen in months. "Hey, Mom," he said, sitting beside her in the lounge. "You came," she said, smiling too much, too fast. He handed her the bag. Inside were peanut brittle, 2 crossword books, and a thick navy blue scarf. "I remembered you liked those," he said. She nodded, too choked up to speak. They sat for nearly an hour. He talked about work, how Amber's new position kept her busy. They'd bought a new coffee table. He mentioned casually that they were trying for a baby. "You'd be a great grandma," he said, looking away. "I'd like that," she whispered. And then he was gone. The visit had warmed her, but it also reopened something inside. The waiting began again. He didn't return the next week. Or the week after. Thanksgiving came. No visit. No phone call. The dining hall served mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce. Eleanor pecked at her food while holiday music played softly in the background. She lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Wondering if she'd made some silent mistake. Wondering if maybe, deep down, Michael had always resented her. For holding him too close. For not letting go. In December, a letter arrived. It wasn't from Michael. It was a card from Amber's office. A generic holiday greeting. Signed, "Warm wishes, the band's and Elliot team." Eleanor smiled bitterly. She tucked it under her pillow. Some nights she'd pull it out just to feel something. Then, in January, everything shifted. A new volunteer arrived, Ben. 19. Tall. A little awkward, with paint on his jeans and a permanent smile. He was studying social work at the community college. He liked to linger by Eleanor's door. "You always writing something?" he asked one morning. "Just memories," she said. "You ever thought of teaching a writing class here?" She looked at him, startled. "Me? I'm no teacher." "Well, you remember things. That's more than most." By February, Eleanor's writing group had 6 residents. They met every Monday in the library. Doris came. So did George, who used to be a jazz pianist. Evelyn wrote poetry. There was laughter again. Pages passed between trembling hands. One day, Eleanor read aloud a letter she'd written to Michael. One she'd never sent. The room fell silent. "I think he's just scared of seeing me like this," she said afterward. "Like I'm no longer who I was." "Maybe he needs to be reminded who you are," Ben said. The next morning, Eleanor found an envelope outside her door. No return address. Inside was a card. The cover read, "I'm sorry I left you there." Her breath caught. Inside was Michael's handwriting. He wrote about the guilt. About the night their newborn son, born just 3 weeks ago, fell asleep on his chest. How holding that tiny body reminded him of everything she had once done for him. How ashamed he felt. How sorry. "If you'll have me," he wrote, "I'd like to visit next Sunday. With your grandson." Eleanor didn't cry. She folded the letter slowly and placed it inside the wooden frame next to the photo of John and baby Michael, the past and the present, side by side. That Sunday, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in weeks. She wore the navy scarf, dabbed a little perfume behind her ears. The door opened. Michael stood there, holding a bundled baby boy. Amber followed, her arms full of flowers and apology. Eleanor reached out. She held her grandson for the first time. And her heart didn't ache. It opened. 30 minutes later, after the baby had fallen asleep in her arms, Michael leaned in and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." Eleanor didn't reply. She just squeezed his hand. That was enough.